Is it something you're still investigating, whether or not they could have been abducted?
So we're exploring all investigative avenues.
I have children, I have grandchildren, and I see what kids are like through the woods. There's no reason for any child to wander deep into the woods. There's just not. I think somebody hurt these kids. I think somebody hurt them.
I know exactly what happened to the kids. The kids are alive. The kids are probably not in Nova Scotia now.
The kids are alive. Despite the chaos, the shifting narratives, and the flood of conflicting statements, one thing remains consistent across nearly every version told, at every point in time, by different people, the belief that Jack and Lily are still alive. But what made so many people say this? What evidence supports such a claim? And if the children truly are alive, where are they now? Where are the kids?
And they may not even be in Canada. Now, that's what I know, and there's a big difference between what I know and what I think. So I just told you what I know. If I turn out to be wrong, the source...
This remains one of the most troubling and persistent questions in the entire case. If Jack and Lily are still alive, where could they possibly be? From the very early stages of the investigation, Darren Geddes, who consistently provided crucial insights and updates of the case to the public, repeatedly suggested that the children might have been taken to a First Nations reserve, a place that could offer a degree of isolation and limited outside oversight. These ideas weren't just wild speculation. They began circulating almost immediately after the disappearance. However, what's deeply concerning is the lack of visible investigative activity in those areas. There has been no public confirmation of searches, no statements from law enforcement indicating that they've questioned individuals in those communities, and no indication that these locations have been seriously considered as part of the ongoing search effort. So where is the problem? Could it be that jurisdictional limitations prevent law enforcement from accessing these areas easily? Or is it that this lead was dismissed early on and is now being quietly buried to avoid acknowledging a critical oversight?
I'm sorry, but that is so, I want to say use the word disgusting, but it's like the pot calling the kettle black. Like, really? You literally have the nerve to say that, Malaya? Sorry, but you said it, you said it. And Daniel is the one that's out there, regardless of what people think, okay? Because whatever the truth is, the truth is. But Daniel's been the one that's out there in the interviews. The behavior panel just critiqued him today based on his interview that he was having with the polygraph and stuff like that. But in saying that, what has Malaya done? So for her to put that, I'm just kind of curious what your thoughts are on that.
Darren, along with others in the discussion, pointed out that despite numerous public theories suggesting that Lily and Jack may have been to live with family on a reserve, the RCMP has done little, if anything, to explore this possibility. He described their efforts as minimal, saying they had barely stepped foot on the reserve, a phrase that underscores a sense of avoidance, whether due to bureaucratic hesitation, fear of political backlash, or outright negligence. This perceived inaction raised broader concerns about the RCMP's priorities and intentions. Darren speculated that the police force may be deliberately withholding information or avoiding certain leads to protect their institutional image. One of the most revealing statements made was his reference to the Oka crisis. They don't want another Oka. The comparison is striking. The Oka crisis of 1990 was a 78-day armed standoff between Mohawk protesters and Canadian forces over a land dispute in Quebec. The confrontation resulted in fatalities, injuries, long-standing trauma for Indigenous communities, and intense national scrutiny over the treatment of First Nations people. The crisis led to policy reforms, a national First Nations policing framework, and massive shifts in public consciousness regarding Indigenous land rights. Still, many of the root issues remain unresolved today. By invoking Oka, Darren suggested that the RCMP is hesitant to tread into reserve territories out of fear of igniting another public crisis, especially one that pits them against indigenous sovereignty and self-governance. His comments imply that the RCMP may be paralyzed by political considerations, worried that entering the reserve too aggressively could be interpreted as state overreach or even colonial intrusion. Further compounding public suspicion is the RCMP's failure to either confirm or deny whether they have investigated the reserve at all. Both Darren and others repeatedly asked why law enforcement hadn't ruled out this possibility. No updates were ever provided. This silence, in Darren's view, is not simply a matter of caution. It reflects a deeper unwillingness to confront what may be a politically charged reality. As a result, many in the community have come to believe that the RCMP is selectively ignoring a critical angle of the investigation. Another key reason for this hesitation likely lies in the legal and jurisdictional complexity surrounding indigenous territories. Darren emphasized that First Nations communities operate under sovereign systems, including their own child protection services. He referenced the ongoing tensions between Native CPS and Canadian CPS, suggesting that there is a struggle over legal authority. This jurisdictional ambiguity creates a gray zone, where the RCMP may not have the legal authority or the political will to act without permission or permission from Indigenous leadership. In these conditions, RCMP officers may be legally restrained or institutionally cautious about stepping into sovereign spaces, especially in the absence of a clear mandate. Darren also implied that if the RCMP were to investigate the reserve thoroughly, the mystery surrounding Lilly and Jack could be quickly resolved. Though he never explicitly named a specific location, the context of his comments pointed strongly to his belief that the children are being cared for in a First Nations community. He seemed confident that the truth is within reach. If only authorities were willing to look in the right place. In the current moves of RCMP, they weren't completely ignoring those places like folks thought. They made a move. A real one. There was a raid. It happened at Millbrook Reserve in Nova Scotia, a place folks around here know well. It's an Indigenous reserve, tucked away but close enough to matter. And for a while now, it's been whispered about as a possible safe haven. Somewhere Malaya Brooks Murray, along with the kids, could have slipped into without much noise. The raid wasn't random. Darren Geddes said so himself. He talked about it during an interview on YouTube, voice shaky but firm. He said the RCMP stormed the reserve at exactly 4:24 in the morning. That wasn't by accident. It was intentional. That's the kind of time you hit when you're trying to catch someone off guard, when folks are still sleeping, unaware, vulnerable. According to Darren, this was their shot at catching whoever might have been hiding those kids. He called it out plainly, said the police believed the children were there, or at least people connected to their disappearance. Millbrook sits close to where the kids went missing. It's a quiet place, not the kind to attract media or crowds. Easy to slip in, easier to hide out. Darren even hinted there were people inside that community helping Malaya. Maybe smuggling the kids out, maybe just buying her time to disappear. Either way, he was sure it wasn't coincidence. But the thing with reserves, it ain't simple. Canadian law doesn't stretch into places like Millbrook without the right paperwork. The RCMP can't just barge in. They need a court order or approval from the tribal council. Without it, they're stuck. That legal loophole, it's what folks call a jurisdictional vacuum. Makes these places hard to touch. Makes them perfect for hiding. Darren's convinced that raid was the first step in something bigger. A plan. Maybe even a network designed to get those kids far away from Nova Scotia. Maybe out of Canada altogether. And the fact that nobody from the RCMP has said a word about it since. Darren says that's no accident either. Either they're keeping it quiet because they're still digging, or they've already given up. Either way, the silence says more than words ever could. What happened to Lilly and Jack? It's now been 2 months since Jack and Lilly Sullivan went missing, far too long for what was initially treated as a simple case of lost children. The first theory pushed forward was that the siblings had wandered off into the woods and somehow gotten lost. But as time passed, explanation began to unravel. There were no signs of a typical search and rescue scenario. No clothing, no belongings, no confirmed sightings. Instead, more and more clues started pointing in a different direction. The children weren't lost, they were taken. In fact, several people connected to the case have suggested that Jack and Lily might actually be safe, just hidden, deliberately kept away from the public eye. And if that's true, then this is no longer a case about a tragic accident in the woods. From the very beginning, the disappearance of Jack and Lily Sullivan was publicly framed by law enforcement as a standard missing persons case. The initial search efforts seemed to support that narrative. Between May 2 and May 7, 2025, RCMP launched what appeared to be a large-scale operation. Over 100 to 160 personnel were reportedly involved, utilizing search and rescue dogs, drones, helicopters, and underwater teams to scour the wooded and rugged areas around Gairloch Road and Lansdowne Station in Nova Scotia. The terrain was particularly challenging, covering 5.5 square kilometers of dense forest, swamp, and steep hills, landscapes still scarred by Hurricane Fiona in 2022. At first glance, this appeared to be a robust and urgent response. But despite the impressive numbers, the reality on the ground painted a different picture. Observers noted that search teams barely penetrated deep into the forest. Markings and ribbons tied to trees, presumably by search crews, were seen only along well-used paths and near roads. Those who ventured deeper into the woods, including concerned citizens, reported no signs of thorough searching. It became increasingly clear that, despite the optics, the actual search effort was limited in scope. This discrepancy between what was claimed and what was actually done sparked the first major doubts about the sincerity and focus of the investigation. By May 7, just 5 days after the children were reported missing, the RCMP announced they were scaling back the operation. Their reasoning: they had found no credible signs that the children remained in the vicinity. While some might accept this as a procedural decision based on evidence, others viewed it as a premature withdrawal from what should have been an active and sustained effort to locate 2 young children in unknown circumstances. It was a critical moment where the public began to wonder whether authorities had truly believed the children were lost to begin with. Adding to the growing skepticism was the delayed issuance of the Vulnerable Person Alert. Although RCMP stated that the alert had been dated on May 2, residents, including those actively following the case like Nova, reported not receiving it until the late afternoon of May 3, a full day and a half later. This delay in alerting the public raises serious questions about how urgently authorities treated the case from the outset. When every minute counts in a child's disappearance, lost time can mean lost lives. Perhaps most puzzling is the RCMP's consistent refusal to classify the case as an abduction. Even now, 2 months later, they have never publicly stated that Jack and Lily may have been taken against their will. This is highly unusual, especially given the complete lack of evidence suggesting the children simply wandered off. According to Darren, a family-connected source who has consistently provided information throughout the case, RCMP's reluctance to use the term abduction signals that they do not believe this was a random or external act. Instead, the implication is that investigators suspect some form of internal family involvement. This theory might make sense from an investigative standpoint, but it has done little to inspire public confidence. Darren also noted something even more unsettling. The silence of the RCMP has, at times, been louder than that of Malaya herself, the mother who remains one of the central figures in this case. There have been no regular press conferences, no consistent updates, no public sharing of new leads or search areas. Compared to other profile missing children's cases, the lack of transparency and communication has been striking. It feels less like a strategic withholding of information and more like a complete breakdown in engagement. Perhaps most concerning is the absence of any clear investigative direction. Despite weeks of testimony, contradicting statements from keepers like Daniel Martel, strange behavior from multiple parties, and ongoing chatter within the online community, no one has been arrested, no one has been charged, and no suspects have been publicly named. In fact, RCMP has never even clarified whether they are treating this as a criminal case or a continued missing persons investigation. This silence, coupled with a lack of visible progress, has led many to believe that the case is not being pursued with the seriousness it deserves. If this were truly a case of two children lost in the woods, the response would likely have been stronger, longer, and more sustained. If it were an abduction, there would be Amber Alerts, public appeals, and pressure on potential suspects. But this case sits somewhere in between, or perhaps nowhere at all, and the lack of clarity from authorities only fuels suspicion. As time continues to pass without answers, the families, the public, and the growing online community following the case are left to wonder, was this ever treated as a real emergency? Or was the conclusion already drawn before the search even began? In fact, evidence suggests that authorities suspected foul play almost immediately, and not just by any outsider. The first individuals under scrutiny were those closest to the children. This case had suspects from the start, and the spotlight quickly turned to the children's mother, Malaya Brooke Murray. Audio obtained from the early phase of the search revealed that investigators were instructed to closely monitor Malaya. Officers on scene were explicitly told not to let her leave the property. This level of control implied suspicion, or at the very least, that she was being treated as someone of high interest.
The drone operator is still on scene with the mom, so
just make sure mom stays close to the house there in case they happen to sneak out and get back into the house.
The focus on Malaya was not arbitrary. Prior to the children's disappearance, both Malaya and her partner Daniel Martel had already been under the radar of authorities. CPS had reportedly been investigating concerns related to the family's living environment and parenting, raising red flags long before Jack and Lily went missing. When the disappearance occurred, both CPS and the RCMP acted quickly. One of the immediate outcomes was the removal of custody rights, at least in Daniel's case. This was a strong indication that law enforcement and social services believed the danger to the children may have come from within the home. The decision to intervene so decisively reflected the seriousness with which authorities viewed the potential risk to other children still in the household. While Malaya remained a person of interest, attention also turned to Daniel Martel, the children's stepfather. According to Daniel himself, he was among the first to be officially investigated. However, he has maintained that his cooperation with law enforcement was entirely voluntary. He claims to have provided the RCMP with a wide range of personal information, including bank records, Google Maps data, and personal items belonging to the missing children. Among these were Lily's white unicorn, plush toy, and Jack's green dinosaur, objects that investigators might use in scent tracking or forensic testing. He also handed over toys belonging to Meadow, the couple's younger child, and items associated with Malaya herself. One of the most notable aspects of Daniel's cooperation was his decision to undergo a polygraph examination. According to Martel, he personally requested the test in response to the growing suspicion and online speculation surrounding his role in the case. The polygraph, administered by the RCMP, reportedly included direct and disturbing questions such as, "Did you kill Lilly and Jack?" and "Were you an accomplice in their deaths?" Daniel pointed out that no question in the test assumed the children had been kidnapped. This, in his view, indicated that investigators were working from the premise that the children may already be dead, an assumption that suggested the RCMP were not entertaining the idea that Jack and Lily had simply wandered off or been taken by an unknown individual. While the RCMP confirmed that polygraph tests were used in the investigation, they did not disclose how many individuals were tested or who they were, except in Martel's case, which became public due to his own disclosures. The polygraph appears to have been one of several tools used to either eliminate or implicate those close to the children. Daniel claimed he passed the test, although results of polygraphs are not always publicly verified or considered legally binding. Beyond Malaya and Daniel, other individuals connected to the children were also investigated. RCMP sources confirmed that Jack and Lily's biological father, Cody, and his mother, Belinda, were both interviewed and assessed early in the case.
It was around between 3 and 3:30 in the morning. A couple of cop cars pull into the driveway. The lights wake me up that I'm a fairly light sleeper, so I see the cars pull in, so I knew what it was. So they come inside. They only stood in the kitchen. They wanted me to wake Cody up, and they wanted to know when was the last time he had seen the kids, and that they were just making sure that the kids weren't here. So it's about 3 weeks. They questioned Cody for an hour and a half in the vehicle, and then they questioned me for 2 hours in the vehicle.
How did that feel to you?
I didn't mind. I mean, to me, I expected I'm the grandmother, so it wasn't a surprise to me. I'm assuming the sooner they do all that, I wish they would have done it sooner, that the sooner they can move on. So I didn't have a problem. My son was a little upset about it. He said they made him feel like he did something wrong, and he said he hadn't seen the kids in 3 years. So he was a little upset about it, that he said that they really come at him hard. They wanted to know what her favorite color was, and he said, they were babies when I seen them last. He said, she was just learning what she wanted to figure out to eat. I don't know what her color is. A couple of days ago, they had contact, and they told him that they weren't looking his way anymore, that everything was fine.
And have they ever given you any information?
No, it's always the same thing.
Their inclusion in the investigation further underscores the fact that the RCMP viewed the disappearance as potentially rooted in family dynamics rather than as a random event. The extensive reach of the investigation wasn't limited to immediate household members either. At least 54 individuals were interviewed, including extended family, neighbors, and others who may have had insight into the children's lives and the events surrounding their disappearance. These interviews were carried out by the Northeast Nova Major Crime Unit, along with support from various other divisions within the RCMP. Their efforts aimed to reconstruct a timeline, identify inconsistencies, and gather any details that might lead to the location of the children or the truth behind what happened. Taken together, these actions point to a critical conclusion. The RCMP never fully accepted the idea that this was a simple case of 2 young children getting lost. The level of scrutiny directed at family members, the involvement of CPS, the use of polygraph testing, and the sheer volume of interviews all indicate that law enforcement believed from the outset that the disappearance was the result of concealment or intentional harm, possibly by people within the children's own circle. Despite this, and despite the intense focus on several key individuals, no one has yet been arrested or officially charged. 2 months into the investigation, there are still no confirmed suspects or public declarations about the direction of the case. But the nature of the investigative steps taken so far speaks volumes. The RCMP may not have made public accusations, but their actions show that they have long suspected this was not a case of chance or misadventure, but one of calculated disappearance, covered in silence, and possibly complicity. The idea of the children not in the wood came from the person who lives near Daniel and Malaya. That's Janie, Daniel's mother. The testimony provided by Janie offers crucial insight into the disappearance of Lily and Jack. According to the information relayed by Janie through Darren Geddes, the children's disappearance may not be a simple case of abduction, as initially suggested by some. Janie's account casts significant doubt on the theory of kidnapping, providing details that suggest something more complex occurred. On the morning of May 2, 2025, Janie was believed not in the trailer next to Daniel and Malaya's house. However, Janie was actually in her car, parked nearby, and she heard the sounds of the children and Malaya, accompanied by the barking of a dog. It seemed as though Malaya was handing the children over to someone. When Janie left her car, the two children were gone. But Malaya was still holding Meadow. When Janie asked where the children were, Malaya's response was simply that they were in the woods. However, her demeanor suggested more than just worry over lost children. Malaya's face appeared guilty, as though she had done something wrong. This raised suspicions about Malaya's involvement, as her response didn't match the expected panic or concern a mother would feel after losing her children. For a detailed timeline, it started on the morning of May 2, 2025. Janie McCann, mother of Daniel Martell, began her day with a call from her brother, Ron, at 6:00 a.m. Janie was asleep at the time and missed the call, but she heard the phone ring. This marks the earliest recorded activity in the timeline of Janie's involvement in the events of that morning. Around 6:10 to 6:15 a.m., Janie called Ron back, as confirmed by Darren, who relayed the information from Janie. This is when Janie is believed to have fully woken up and begun her day. After the call, she either rested or dozed off, not fully sleeping, but remaining in a state where she could hear sounds around her. It was during this resting period that Janie heard noises coming from outside. Specifically, the sound of Malaya Brooks Murray and the children, Lilly and Jack, leaving the house through the back sliding door. Janie's dog also began barking, which she attributed to the unusual movement of Malaya and the children. The dog's barking caught Janie's attention and served as a signal of activity outside. At some point after hearing the noises, Janie reportedly saw Malaya on the driveway, acting strangely, which stood out to her. This event occurred shortly after Lilly and Jack were believed to have been put into a vehicle and driven away. Janie saw Malaya in this unusual state from her RV, which was parked on the same property as the main house. However, the timeline is unclear as to whether Janie saw Malaya at 6:15 a.m., when she might have been outside with the dog, or later, at 8 a.m. or 8:45 a.m. This uncertainty about the exact time of Janie's sighting of Malaya raises questions about the consistency of the timeline and adds a layer of complexity to the investigation. The conflicting reports about whether Janie saw Malaya once or twice only increase suspicions about the clarity of her account. Janie's detailed timeline of events was reportedly recorded on her phone, which includes the exact time of Ron's call at 6 a.m., the time she called him back, when she heard Malaya and the children leave, and when she saw Malaya on the driveway. Darren asserts that Janie is able to provide exact times down to the minute and is willing to clarify these details in a public interview, such as with CBC, if given the opportunity. However, there are several points in the timeline that remain unclear. First, the exact time the children were taken is uncertain. While one source of information suggests 8 a.m. based on police audio, others claim it happened around 8:45 a.m. This 45-minute gap in timing raises questions about the events during this period. The second issue is Janie's sighting of Malaya on the driveway. It is not certain whether this occurred at 6:15 a.m., after Janie might have been outside with the dog, or if it happened at 8 a.m. or 8:45 a.m. The ambiguity about whether Janie saw Malaya once or twice only fuels further suspicion about the consistency of her testimony. The 2-hour window between 8 a.m. and 10 a.m., from when the children were last seen until the 911 call was made, is another crucial period. During this time, the children may have walked a significant distance, or could have been driven far away. This 2-hour gap in the timeline adds to the uncertainty of the case and complicates the investigation. The police dispatch audio from 8 a.m. mentioning that the children were last seen at that time, contrasted with the 8:45 a.m. time cited in some statements. This discrepancy in the timeline raises questions about the accuracy of the information being reported, as well as the confusion surrounding the events of that morning. In conclusion, the timeline provided by Janie offers critical insight into the morning of May 2, 2025, but also presents several points of uncertainty. While Janie's detailed recollections are consistent in some areas, the lack of clarity in others, such as the timing of her observations and the conflicting reports about when the children were last seen, creates gaps in the investigation. Adding the testimony, the search of Lilly and Jack found various clues, including child-sized footprints and evidence from the RCMP's police dog services. These pieces of evidence have played a significant role in shaping theories surrounding the disappearance, but they have also raised questions about the investigation's direction and what they truly reveal. The footprints were found at the end of the driveway on Gerlach Road, near the pipeline trail, roughly 1 km from the house where Lilly and Jack lived. The footprints were discovered during the initial search, either on May 2nd or shortly thereafter. According to Daniel Martell, the stepfather of the missing children, the footprint was found in soft gravel, an area where Janie McCann, Daniel's mother, had recently added fresh gravel. This detail was relayed through Darren, who conveyed Janie's account. The discovery of the footprint near the end of the driveway supports the theory that Lilly and Jack may have walked to that point and were then picked up by a vehicle. However, the significance of this footprint remains in question. The RCMP has not confirmed whether the print belongs to Lilly or Jack, and it has not been deemed a conclusive piece of evidence in the investigation. The footprint was found in an area the children had frequented to catch the school bus, so it's possible it was a trace from a regular trip rather than one directly related to the disappearance. Additionally, while the footprint is consistent with the theory that the children may have been intentionally taken by vehicle, the absence of additional confirming evidence, such as surveillance video, keeps this theory speculative. Furthermore, the police dog services played a key role in the search efforts, with teams deployed immediately following the report of Lilly and Jack's disappearance. The dogs, along with over 100 volunteers, drones, helicopters, and rescue teams, scoured the area. The dogs were able to detect a piece of a blanket, which is believed to have belonged to Lilly. This piece of evidence was located near Gerlach Road, not far from the children's home. Malia Brooks Murray, the children's mother, believed that the blanket was indeed Lilly's, as reported by an official over unencrypted radio. The dogs followed a scent trail leading to the end of the driveway, where the child-sized footprint was found, but the trail did not continue further. This discovery was significant in that it aligned with the theory that Lilly and Jack were possibly picked up at the end of the driveway. Yet the trail did not lead to any additional findings, either in the surrounding forest or near Lansdowne Lake. Despite extensive searches in these areas, no further signs of the children were found, which raises doubts about the route they took. Cadaver dogs were also brought into the search by the RCMP, with Daniel Martell noting that the RCMP informed him of their use in the area around Lansdowne Lake. This suggests that the RCMP considered the possibility that the children might no longer be alive. However, there has been no confirmation that the cadaver dogs found any traces linked to Lilly and Jack in the area. This lack of findings adds another layer of uncertainty to the case and further complicates the search efforts. As the investigation into the disappearance of Lilly and Jack unfolds, one of the most glaring aspects that raises doubt about the official narrative is the series of inconsistencies in the statements made by Daniel Martell, the children's stepfather. Initially, Daniel told the media that Lilly and Jack had opened the sliding door at the back of the house on their own and wandered into the nearby woods by Gerlach Road without making any noise. He explained that, on the morning of May 2, 2025, he and Malia Brooks Murray were in the bedroom with their daughter Meadow. Lilly had come in and out of the room several times, and Daniel heard Jack in the kitchen, but he didn't hear the children leave. However, this initial story began to unravel when Daniel later admitted, through Darren, that he had lied about the children wandering off to protect Malia. This admission directly contradicted his earlier statements, which he had repeated multiple times in the days following the disappearance. Daniel's shift from the story of the children going missing to admitting that he had fabricated the details suggests that he might have known more than he initially let on. His actions imply that he could have been attempting to shield Malia from responsibility, which raises doubts about his honesty and the validity of his earlier claims. Further complicating Daniel's story is his recent interview with CBC News. During this interview, he suggested that there was more to the story that he couldn't disclose. This comment sharply contrasts with his earlier openness when he provided detailed information to the media about the case. The inconsistency between his previous willingness to share everything and his recent suggestion of hidden details implies that Daniel might be withholding crucial information or is aware of a different scenario, one where Malaya could have been involved in orchestrating the children's departure. This shift in behavior fuels suspicion about his true involvement in the case and whether he is keeping significant details to himself. Another key inconsistency lies in Daniel's confirmation of Darren's story. Darren, initially known by the alias Durwood, claimed that Malaya had arranged for Lilly and Jack to be taken by a vehicle on the morning of May 2025. Daniel later acknowledged, via text message, that this version of events could be true. This is in direct contradiction to Daniel's original account that the children had simply gone missing by wandering into the woods. Although Daniel did not publicly confirm or elaborate on Darren's story, his partial acknowledgement of it via private messages suggests that he may have known about the planned disappearance from the start. This is in stark contrast to the version of events he shared with the media and RCMP initially, adding to the perception that he might be concealing key details. The timeline surrounding the disappearance is another area where Daniel's statements fail to align. Daniel referenced a 20-minute window in his initial account, but it is unclear whether this referred to the time between when he last saw Lilly, when he heard Jack in the kitchen, or when he realized the children were missing. This lack of clarity is problematic, especially since it does not match other reported timelines, such as the police dispatch audio, which suggests the children were last seen around 8 a.m., with the 911 call occurring at 10 a.m. The confusion regarding the 20-minute period raises concerns about whether Daniel is being fully transparent about the timeline of events and whether he is intentionally leaving out crucial moments. Despite cooperating with the RCMP, providing his phone, bank records, Google Maps data, and other personal items, Daniel's behavior remains suspect due to the contradictions in his statements. He passed a polygraph test, claiming he had no involvement in harming the children, but the fact that he later admitted to lying about the initial details and hinted at undisclosed information casts doubt on his complete transparency. While his cooperation with the RCMP suggests he is not entirely withholding evidence, his admission of dishonesty and his refusal to fully explain what he knows lead to the conclusion that he may be selectively withholding information to protect either Malaya or himself. Following the inconsistency of Daniel, Malaya Brooks Murray, the mother of Lilly and Jack, has exhibited several suspicious behaviors following the reported disappearance of her children, which have raised concerns and led to theories that she may have played a more significant role in their disappearance than initially suggested. Her actions, ranging from leaving the area shortly after the disappearance to cutting off contact with her partner Daniel Martel, have been seen as red flags by both the public and the investigators. These behaviors, when considered together, paint a picture of someone trying to distance themselves from the situation and potentially hide crucial details about what really happened to the children. One of the first suspicious actions took place on May 2025, the same day Lilly and Jack were reported missing. Malaya left the Lansdowne Station area shortly after the incident was reported, taking her youngest daughter, Meadow, with her. She moved to an undisclosed location in Nova Scotia to stay with family, which raised immediate questions about why she would leave the area where her children went missing. Although some sources suggest that she left due to an argument between her family and Daniel's, this information remains unverified. Even without this incident, Malaya's decision to leave so suddenly, especially with her child missing, seemed to be a questionable choice and only added to the suspicions surrounding her actions. Another significant aspect of Malaya's behavior was her decision to block Daniel Martel, her partner and the stepfather of Lilly and Jack, on social media shortly after leaving the area. This move indicated some form of tension or conflict within the relationship. Blocking Daniel could be seen as a deliberate attempt to sever ties, which in turn fueled the theory that Malaya may have planned to take her children away without his knowledge or consent. It could also suggest that she wanted to distance herself from any potential blame or scrutiny related to the children's disappearance, particularly since Daniel had been cooperating with the RCMP and the media, providing information and engaging with the search efforts. Malaya's avoidance of contact with Daniel on such a crucial matter only deepened suspicions that she was trying to cover something up. In addition to severing ties with Daniel, Malaya ceased all communication with the media after an initial interview on May 3, 2025. According to reports, she was advised by the RCMP to stop speaking with the press, which raised further concerns. While it's not uncommon for law enforcement to recommend that individuals refrain from discussing ongoing investigations, Malaya's sudden silence stood in stark contrast to Daniel's more open and consistent engagement with the media. This abrupt change in her willingness to speak out made it seem as she had something to hide, especially when compared to Daniel's transparency and willingness to provide details about the situation. Malaya's refusal to speak further to the press or clarify her actions only intensified the suspicion that she might be concealing important information. Another behavior that raised questions was Malaya's early call to the school on the morning of May 2, 2025. Around 6:15 a.m., she reportedly called the school to inform them that Lilly and Jack would not be attending due to Lily's alleged illness. This call was made from the driveway, which was noted as the location where Janie McCann, Daniel's mother, later claimed to have seen Malaya acting. Strangely, the fact that Malaya made this call early in the morning, before the children were even reported missing, coupled with her presence on the driveway, is suspicious. The timing and the location of the call suggest that Malaya might have been preparing for the children's departure or trying to cover up the fact that they were no longer home. This early action could have been part of a larger plan to make it seem as though everything was normal when, in fact, she may have already been making arrangements for the children to leave. Darren has suggested that Malaya may have orchestrated the disappearance of Lilly and Jack, and that she arranged for the children to be taken away in a vehicle on the morning of May 2. According to Janie McCann's account, Malaya was seen with Lilly and Jack leaving the house through the back sliding door, and later, Malaya was observed acting strangely on the driveway. This aligns with Darren's theory that the children were picked up by someone and taken away, possibly to another location, such as a Firshins Reserve or New Brunswick, where they could be hidden away. If this theory is correct, Malaya would have lied to the police about the children wandering off into the woods, attempting to cover up her actions and protect herself from any potential legal consequences. Malaya's initial statements about the disappearance further complicate the situation. In her first interview on May 3, 2025, she claimed that she and Daniel had been asleep with Meadow when Lilly and Jack had somehow opened the sliding door and wandered off. This story, which was later repeated by Daniel, was immediately contradicted by Darren's account, which suggested that Malaya had known all along that the children had been taken away. Daniel himself later admitted to lying to protect Malaya, which only raises further questions about the validity of Malaya's original story. The contradiction between her initial claim and the later revelations suggests that Malaya may have been deliberately hiding the truth about what happened to Lilly and Jack. The ambiguity surrounding the timeline on the morning of May 2, 2025, is another area where Malaya's behavior raises red flags. From the time of the call to the school at 6:15 a.m. to the 9/11 call at 10 a.m., there is a 2-hour gap during which it is unclear what exactly transpired. Malaya has not provided any further details to clarify this period, and her refusal to speak publicly about it only fuels suspicions that she may have been involved in the children's disappearance. During this critical window of time, the lack of transparency during this period creates a significant gap in the investigation and makes it difficult to piece together the sequence of events. The family dynamics also offer some insight into Malaya's possible motives. After her separation from Cody Sullivan, Lilly and Jack's biological father, Malaya, was granted sole custody of the children, which gave her legal authority to make decisions about their care and whereabouts. This custody arrangement means that Malaya could have made the decision to take the children without needing Daniel's approval, further suggesting that she might have had a personal or emotional reason for wanting to leave him. Malaya's decision to leave so abruptly, without informing anyone of her plans, hints that she might have been trying to start a new life, possibly away from Daniel and the complications of their family situation. In conclusion, Malaya's actions following Lilly and Jack's disappearance have raised serious concerns about her role in the case. Her decision to leave the area, cut off contact with Daniel, cease communication with the media, and offer contradictory statements all point to the possibility that she was involved in the children's disappearance. The lack of transparency, combined with the conflicting stories and her avoidance of responsibility, makes it increasingly difficult to trust her account of the events. Whether Malaya was trying to protect herself, hide her involvement, or simply escape a difficult situation, her actions cast a shadow of doubt over the investigation and the search for Lilly and Jack. Given the evidence available, both confirmed and unconfirmed, it's becoming increasingly clear that this may not be a typical missing persons case, but rather a deliberate cover-up orchestrated by someone within the family. The inconsistencies in the stories, the sudden departure of Malaya, Brooks Murray, and the suspicious actions she took after Lilly and Jack were reported missing all point to the possibility that she played a key role in their disappearance. If she is indeed involved in concealing their whereabouts, the question remains, what was her true motive? Could it be that she was trying to protect them from something or someone, or is there another, more personal reason for her to have hidden her children away? The motives. Malaya Brooks Murray's actions surrounding the disappearance of her children, Lilly and Jack, have raised significant questions, especially when viewed in the context of her past trauma. It has been suggested that she may be dealing with PTSD, stemming from her tumultuous relationship with Cody Sullivan, the father of her children. According to Belinda Gray, Lilly and Jack's grandmother, Malaya's relationship with Cody was fraught with tension and ultimately ended in a custody battle, with Malaya winning sole custody of the children. After the separation, Cody's life unraveled further as he began to heavily drink and use drugs, which likely contributed to his inability to maintain a stable relationship with his children. The deterioration of Malaya and Cody's relationship seems to have begun after Jack was born, a particularly challenging time for any mother. The emotional toll of a strained relationship during this period may have been significant for Malaya, as this is a critical time when a woman is often in need of support and stability. The trauma from this relationship, along with the difficulties in co-parenting with Cody, could have left emotional scars that may explain some of Malaya's later actions. Another key element that points to potential PTSD in Malaya is her decision to cut off contact with her family, particularly with Belinda Vlee after moving in with Daniel Martell. According to Belinda, Malaya was initially open to allowing regular visits from her mother, but after moving to Lansdowne Station with Daniel, she gradually restricted and eventually severed all ties with her family. This isolation could suggest that Malaya was attempting to distance herself from any reminders of her past life with Cody, as well as the painful memories associated with him and his family. If Malaya was indeed suffering from PTSD, her choice to isolate herself from her own family could be seen as a coping mechanism to avoid triggers related to her traumatic experiences. Furthermore, there is a possibility that Malaya's actions were motivated by a desire to protect her children from Cody Sullivan and his family. According to theories suggested by Darren and Janie McCann, Malaya may have taken Lilly and Jack to a remote location, such as a First Nations reserve or New Brunswick, to shield them from any potential intervention by Cody or his family. This idea aligns with the notion that Malaya was acting out of a desire to protect her children, stemming from a deeply ingrained fear of what might happen if they were returned to Cody's custody. If Malaya suffered from PTSD, particularly due to her past experiences with Cody, it's possible she was trying to prevent any further emotional or psychological harm to her children by removing them from a situation where she felt they could be vulnerable. At the time of the incident, it is also suggested that Malaya was struggling with postpartum depression after the birth of her youngest child, Meadow. The combination of these mental health struggles, PTSD from her relationship with Cody, postpartum depression, and conflicts with Daniel's mother, may have contributed to Malaya's inability to make sound decisions during this crisis. The emotional toll of managing these psychological issues could have clouded her judgment, leading to a series of impulsive decisions that may have included taking Lilly and Jack away in an attempt to escape the perceived threats and pressures surrounding her. Malaya Brooks Murray's actions following the disappearance of her children, Lilly and Jack, have raised questions about her motivations, especially when viewed through the lens of her past experiences and the cultural context of her background as a member of the Sapeknetik First Nation. A key factor that may have influenced her decisions is the fear of losing custody of her children, a fear deeply rooted in her history and the broader historical trauma experienced by Indigenous communities, particularly the legacy of the 60s scoop. This period, lasting from the 1950s to the 1980s, saw thousands of Indigenous children forcibly taken from their families by child welfare agencies, a practice that left a lasting mistrust of government authorities and child protection services in many Indigenous communities. Malaya's own history with Cody Sullivan, the biological father of Lilly and Jack, plays a crucial role in understanding her potential fears. After the breakdown of their relationship, which became increasingly strained with Cody's substance abuse issues, Malaya sought and won sole custody of the children. This decision marked a pivotal moment in her life, as she faced the burden of raising her children alone while dealing with the tension in her relationship with Cody, who had withdrawn from the children's lives. The situation became even more complicated with Malaya's move to live with Daniel Martel, as she gradually cut off contact with her family, particularly her mother-in-law, Belinda Gray. This isolation from her own family could have been a response to the stress of her past relationship, as well as an attempt to protect herself and her children from external interference. The fear of losing her children may have been heightened by the investigation conducted by CPS in Nova Scotia, which had raised concerns about the welfare of Lilly and Jack. Reports indicate that CPS had begun investigating the living conditions of the children a few months prior to their disappearance, following a report from a school employee concerned about their developmental delays. For many Indigenous people, especially those from communities affected by the 60s scoop, such investigations can be perceived as a direct threat. The historical trauma associated with children being removed from their families during the 60s scoop likely fueled Malaya's fear that CPS could take her children away, leading her to act preemptively to protect them. In this context, Malaya's actions make more sense. She may have viewed the CPS investigation as a sign that her children could be taken from her, and she might have feared that if Lilly and Jack were taken into state custody, they would be placed in an environment that stripped them of their cultural identity, just as many Indigenous children were during the 60s scoop. This deeply ingrained fear of losing her children to the state could have been the driving force behind her decision to take them and hide them away, possibly in a First Nations reserve or a remote location like New Brunswick. where they would be beyond the reach of CPS or other state agencies. Such a decision, if true, would have been motivated not by malice, but by a desperate need to protect her children from what she perceived as a system that had historically been hostile to indigenous families. Malahia's decision to remove Lilly and Jack from their familiar surroundings and take them to a potentially safer place reflects the trauma-induced protective instincts that may have been at play. The choice of a First Nations reserve as a refuge further underscores her desire to keep her children in a culturally appropriate environment, where they would not be separated from their heritage. If Malahia was indeed influenced by the fear of losing her children, it would explain why she might have acted in secrecy, refusing to communicate with authorities or the media, and why she abruptly left the area with Meadow, her youngest daughter, shortly after the disappearance was reported. This behavior, including her refusal to cooperate with CPS and the RCMP, could be viewed as a manifestation of the distrust that many Indigenous people feel toward government systems, particularly when it comes to child welfare. Moreover, the fear of losing custody may have been exacerbated by the cultural and legal complexities surrounding custody in the context of Indigenous communities. As a member of Sepeknikatik First Nation, Malahia may have been acutely aware of the challenges that Indigenous parents face in maintaining custody of their children in a system that has historically undermined Indigenous rights. The legal challenges, combined with the fear of CPS intervention, could have driven Malahia to take extreme measures to ensure that her children were not taken from her, even if it meant going into hiding. The significance of her actions also lies in the broader context of Indigenous peoples' mistrust of government institutions. Malia's reluctance to engage with the RCMP or share information about her children's whereabouts aligns with the historical experience in as people who have been subjected to systemic discrimination and forced separation. This history has created a collective fear of government institutions, particularly in the context of child welfare. For Malia, the fear of losing her children to a system that had previously failed Indigenous families may have been so overwhelming that it prompted her to take drastic action. The trauma from her past relationship with Cody, compounded by her fear of CPS involvement and the historical context of the 60s scoop, likely influenced Malaya's decision to act as she did. Whether or not she believed her children were in immediate danger from the state, the fear of them being taken from her, just as many Indigenous children were in the past, may have clouded her judgment and led her to make a choice that was ultimately detrimental to both her and her children's future. In conclusion, Malia's behavior, including her actions following Lilly and Jack's disappearance, may be driven by a deep-seated fear of losing her children, a fear rooted in the traumatic legacy of the 60s scoop. This fear of state intervention, combined with her past relationship struggles, may have led her to take extreme measures to protect her children from what she saw as a harmful system. Whether these actions were justified or not, they underscore the profound emotional and psychological impact that historical trauma can have on individuals, particularly within Indigenous communities. The legacy of the 60s scoop continues to shape the lives and decisions of those affected by it, and, for Malia, the fear of losing her children may have been a powerful motivator in her decision to conceal their whereabouts. Here's the thing about this case. The story of Jack and Lilly Sullivan isn't just about missing kids. It's about what happens when silence fills the space where answers should be. It's about the weight of grief, the blur between guilt and survival, and the lengths people go to when they feel the world closing in on them. If there's anything we've learned from this, anything at all, it's that not every disappearance is what it looks like. The easy answers aren't always the right ones. And sometimes, the people we think are villains, they're just scared, desperate, trying to outrun a system that's failed them before. Let's face it, Malaya's actions after her children vanished, walking away, cutting off everyone, blocking messages, deleting her accounts, going silent, Yeah. It raised every red flag. She looked guilty. Cold. But what if it wasn't about guilt? What if it was about something else entirely? Janie's account points straight to that possibility. She wasn't guessing. She wasn't caught up in social media theories. She heard what she heard. She saw what she saw. Malaya walking with one child. The back door, the car doors, the gravel, the barking dog. And then, nothing, clean. No struggle. No panic. No chaos. And that's what makes this case so different. No signs of violence. No trace of the children anywhere near those woods. It doesn't add up to a crime scene. It adds up to something else. A handoff. A quiet exit. A move planned down to the last detail. Then there's Darren's belief, one that hasn't wavered since day one. He says nearly 100% of cases like this, especially involving indigenous families and tangled family histories, lead to the same place. Reserves or tight-knit indigenous communities in like New Brunswick. Places where state agencies like CPS can't easily reach. Places where people know how to hide in plain sight. When you line it all up, it fits. Malaya's past with CPS. Her fear of losing her kids. Her breaking point after everything spiraled out of control. It doesn't excuse her actions, but it explains them. To someone like her, vanishing with her children might have felt like the only way to keep them safe. To protect them from what she saw as a worse fate, being taken by the state. And here's the hard truth, there's still hope. Strong hope. Because everything in this case points toward protection, not harm. Toward escape, not tragedy. Toward survival, not death. So if you're sitting there, heart heavy, wondering if Jack and Lily are gone forever, don't lose hope yet. Don't let the fear win. The signs say they're out there. Alive. Hidden, protected. Not lost. This isn't the ending. It's just another chapter. And maybe, one day, they'll come home. Until then, hope. Always hope.